remember the domain equation?
Yeah. Domain equation is this recursive relation between, I think it's one, I'll probably not find it now. I will definitely search for this, and I can send you the link.
I'd appreciate it. He mentioned that it was like 2 or 3 episodes before he had introduced it.
Yeah. I will definitely find it and send you the info.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, I don't know if they can hear me. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Hey, good morning. Oh, nice. There's Isaac.
The gang's all here.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Jim. Hi, Jay. Isaac.
How's it going?
What's up, guys? Good morning.
Hi.
Good evening for some.
Yeah.
For anyone?
Yeah. What do we have on schedule for this morning?
Well, I had an idea that I could share about running multiple Casper sessions on the same block DAG. It's not as thought out as it maybe could have been. It's mostly just an idea, but if you guys want to explore a half-baked idea and just try to help decide if it makes any sense, I'd be down for that.
Oh yeah, this sounds interesting.
Okay, cool. So just be forewarned that we might get halfway through and realize it doesn't make any sense, but
Yeah.
that's how ideas go sometimes.
Well, I think you're going into a difficult problem here, and it's bound to explode into complexity.
Yeah, right. Also wanted to just show something interesting that we're doing today before I start.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Isaac and I are in the same place today. I think I'm going to turn this thing into a whiteboard so that we can try to illustrate this idea. Give me 1 second.
I'm not sure how to do the sound.
I think let's do it through yours because I'm going to be tapping on this.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to get that.
Oh,
Feedback.
okay. How are we doing now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Feedback.
Yeah, that seems good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys can still hear me through Isaac's mic, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let me share my screen. Hi, Laura. Share. Oh, I forgot the pen that goes with this.
It's just a stylus.
It might be.
Yeah, all right, I can grab one.
Okay, so basically the idea is that, hold on, I'm getting echo. This is maybe more confusing than I realized. Okay, maybe that's a little bit better. So the idea is I want to draw a block DAG and give validators weights in the same way that we always used to give them weights and have consensus start forming. And then the idea is basically we're going to have a whole separate instance of Casper. So that means like separate validators are bonded with separate weights and see if they can play like a Casper consensus game on the same block DAG. And if they can, I'm hoping it might start getting towards something that seems sort of like sharding like, or a cool kind of sharding where we can have like partial consensus, or just to sort of give an intuition of what I'm thinking. I remember Greg used to have this idea of like, it's almost always the case that something that like a financial transaction that happens here in Cleveland is not going to be dependent on or be depended on by some other transaction that happens, down in Tampa or over in Croatia or something. And so it would be nice if we didn't have to have consensus on like those ordering kind of things. And so I'm sort of thinking of this, just to give a rough intuition, as like, imagine there's some local in some sense. It might be geographic, or it might be more of like local in a social network, like local to people that I care about. And we're playing some Casper. And when I'm making day-to-day transactions, I really only care that my local Casper instance like comes to consensus over these. And then meanwhile, on the rare occasions when I buy something from China or whatever, then we have to get consensus over both my local validators and also like whatever validators the seller from China cares about or something like that.
And can you relate this to a validator rotation? Because when I think about validator rotation, I'm thinking how you separate the validators in some kind of groups, when only part of the validators are validating some blocks, right? And did you maybe make connection?
It might be, yeah, it might actually be a similar idea. I don't actually have a good working understanding of, so I'm thinking of validator rotation. I think the only meaning of that phrase I know right now, and I don't even know if this is a normal one, is like the bonding and unbonding that our chain sort of prepares for, where we're like, today the validator sets are these many people, but like later others might join, or like some might decide they don't want to be validators anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
But I know there's other ideas, like we've talked about round robin before, and I know like I've heard of models that I haven't fully understood, where like if you can sign up to be a validator and then you get pseudo randomly or maybe randomly like assigned to some particular shard or something like that. I don't know. I don't feel like I know much about those though.
Yeah,
me
but
too.
in the round robin method, each they're all still, like, even if you're not validating on a certain round, you're still taking that round at like face value that somebody else validated, versus this would be almost like completely separate like branches, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm picturing it. That's basically what I'm thinking. Okay, so let me just try to start to illustrate it. And again, like I said, we'll probably get to points where it's like, oh, that doesn't make as much sense, or like we need to do something different. But I'm just gonna try to start to like draw down the picture that I have in my head, and we'll see if it makes sense. And I think maybe to start with, so in the past when we've talked Casper, we've done like the Casper view and the blockchain view separately. And I think maybe just to start with, we'll set it up so that there's only like one view of the DAG that we can call like the global view, and we'll just make the simplifying assumption that like network latency is super low compared to reaction time or like whatever other times we care about, so that at least for now we can assume like once a block is published, everybody has seen it basically right away, and then we'll see if this works even in that case, and then we'll see if we can go back to some of the like network latency and Alice didn't see Charlie's thing yet kind of scenarios we had. Okay, so let's put some validators up here. We'll do like Alice, Bob, Charlie, Dave, and I guess Eve, but she's not evil yet. And so here's so one idea that I also have been kicking around that I think will be super helpful in this concept is the idea of zero weight validators. And it works, it's basically like the natural way you would think it would work, the way we've always talked about Casper. And the idea is like, if someone's unbonded, so like maybe we'll say Alice has weight 5 and Bob has weight 4 and Charlie has weight 2. And then like Dave and Eve over here both have weight 0. So it works kind of the way you'd expect. It basically means like they can both propose their own blocks and put blocks in the DAG, but in terms of scoring those blocks, they're not actually, like they haven't staked any rev or whatever staking token, and they're not actually like putting anything on the line. And I think it's a nice idea for a couple reasons. One is that like, if I'm Dave, I don't have to like rely on one of Alice, Bob, or Charlie not trying to censor me in order to get something out there. Like I can just throw it out there anytime I want. it obviously won't get consensus until weighted validators have built upon it or signaled their support for it. But like, at least it's out there, and maybe Eve isn't trying to censor and she can like keep it in her DAG, but it gets orphaned off or whatever. I don't think it hurts anything. And then like, I'm not ready to do this yet, but just as a spoiler of where I'm going to try to go, later I'm going to draw in other numbers and say like, maybe these guys are zero weight validators, but these guys are like in some different Casper protocol where, Dave and Eve have their own stakes or something like that.
But these validators with zero weight, you counting them as part of the all validators?
Yeah, that's right. So my thought is that like the algorithm would have to look something like this. So I think with the way we've talked about Casper so far and the way it's implemented in our chain, there's this assumption that all validators know the complete set of other validators. And that basically is going to look the same, but it's going to just be phrased a little different. So it's going to be something like every validator knows every other bonded validator and will consider any valid key pair a zero weight validator unless they're already bonded. So if we're using some cipher where there's like 2 to the 256 possible key pairs or something, then Alice looks at this thing and she says like, okay, well, there's 3 bonded validators. I know each of their public keys, which is like basically how she identifies Alice or Bob or Charlie, and I also know their weights. And then I also know that if any other valid key pair comes along, I'm going to treat them implicitly as a validator, but as a zero weight validator. And if they want to be one of these non-zero weights, then they have to bond or however that works.
So in a sense, validator with zero weights is like normal client that can just deploy another block.
Exactly right. That's exactly the idea. Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact, maybe we can start with one of those. So I'll leave the blue numbers for now, but we're not using them yet. So let's just say like, man, we actually haven't done one of these in a while. It's going to be cool to do one of the actual graphs. So let's say like Bob makes a transaction here and it just builds. I think we used to put the Genesis block like up top. So let's say Bob's just builds off the Genesis block. And then Dave makes a block here and builds off of there. And then Charlie makes a block. And I don't have a super clear plan yet. I'm just kind of like building a sort of pseudo-random DAG, and we'll try to make something interesting happen in it. So there's some kind of DAG like this forming. And so these lines that I'm drawing here are not justifications, because I'm sort of assuming like Alice has seen all 3 of those other blocks before she builds her block. And they're just the parents. Like these blocks are just the, Alice's Bob builds off of Charlie's block and doesn't make sense without it, sort of thing. So
can you label these?
Yeah, I should. Yeah, let's label them. Let's do, I'm gonna make, oh no. Make it just a little bit bigger. Well, oh, in fact, whose block was that?
That was Bob's.
That was, yeah, nice. Okay, so we'll call this B1. We'll call this one C1, no, D1. Yeah. And we'll call this one C1. And we'll call this one A1. Okay. So at some point, something might happen. So basically, I think if all of these blocks are non-contentious, I don't claim to have a proof of this, but it's just sort of an intuition. Like if blocks keep getting built that like actually build on top of each other correctly and play nicely, and there's no double spends or whatever malicious things could potentially happen, I think probably the like pink Casper and the blue Casper will stay in consensus with one another. Mostly because I can't think of any reason why anyone would want to would want to not stay in consensus with one another. Like if you think of the pink Casper as being the, like, you know, the real Casper, or like your home Casper or something, then it doesn't seem like it would do any harm to go ahead and include blocks like D1, for example, especially once, like, later on, you know, this block C1 comes into the picture, because like Charlie has some weight in this pink Casper, and so if we want to include Charlie's block, then we have to include Dave's block because it's a dependency. And so like later on, Alice wants to build on Charlie's block, and so it seems like all of these D and E blocks are going to sort of get brought into the DAG in exactly the same way they would if like Dave and Eve were just deploying their stuff to one of these 3 bonded validators. And then the same argument like the other way around.
So are these 2 instances of Casper? They're playing by the same rules, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Same rules that we've talked about.
It's just like different known validator sets in each.
Bingo.
Okay.
That's right. And so like in the RChain world, the way I was picturing this working is like proof of stake is managed by a contract in Rolang, and I don't know if it works the same way in other blockchains, but I think it could at least. And so there's no, just like we can deploy a bunch of different ERC20 tokens, there's no reason we can't deploy like multiple instances of this Casper proof of stake kind of contract. And it may be the case that like they would want different staking tokens or need different staking tokens, or maybe it would be fine if they all use like the same rev or something. And I haven't really thought about that. Okay, so let's try to see like what happens if we have some kind of contentious block. So let's just say we put in Eve makes a block right here, and we'll call it E1. And it builds off of D1. And so far, depending on like exactly what we're coming to consensus over, it isn't necessarily the case that C1 and E1 conflict just because they have common parents, but like maybe we can think of them as like double spending one of the outputs of D1, or in an RChain scenario, like both consuming the same send of D1 put into the tuple space or something. So we'll just like, these 2 conflict. I'll just kind of try to color them in to make them look scared. So those conflict now. And so what I want to sort of explore is like, how would the 2 different validator sets handle this situation? And then further, like assuming they sort of split up into their tribes where Alice, Bob, Charlie sort of all go along with Charlie, and Dave and Eve kind of all go along with Eve. I'm curious if it's possible to then still have these 2 different tribes like interact productively in some other ways. So like just to make it pretty concrete, you can imagine this being like block D is something interesting happened with the DAO, and then like in block C1, this is like changing something to give everybody their money back. In block E1 is like the hackers running off with the funds or something. Or maybe C1 is like the original depositors withdrawing their funds so they can't get stolen, and E1 is the thief stealing them. And so like, if ABC is the main Ethereum crew, like, we're not letting this thief get away, and DE is like the Ethereum Classic crew, like, yeah, they definitely disagree about how that particular DAO thing resolved, but we could conceive of it still being useful for them to interact in some other ways, ways that were sort of independent of the DAO. And I don't know if we have enough blocks to illustrate that yet, but if not, maybe we can go back and add some more. So I guess maybe my first question is like, let's say Bob goes to build the next block. Just according to the regular Casper rules, I'm curious like where Bob wants to build now. And we have to, I think we'll have to score some of these, and it's been a little while since we've done that, but maybe this will be a good exercise.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to be sure that I understand?
Yeah.
So ABC are part of the one validator set, and D and E are another validator set.
Yeah, that's right.
And so from perspective of ABC, D and E are just another clients that deploy some contracts on other blocks.
That's right.
And if they don't have connection between, how they will know for this contention?
Yeah, right. So the important part is that they're sharing this same whole block DAG, right? So it's not like two totally separate blockchains or DAGs or anything like that. It's just that they have different understanding of who are the sort of like authorities or the people, the validators, who are the people who have the social weight in order to start to form consensus. So your question was like, how do they know about this contention, right? And so basically, this is sort of a non-answer first, but the answer is in the same ways that they would notice the contention if I hadn't written those blue numbers up there, right? Like you can imagine Charlie deploying some code on his own since he's bonded according to Pink Casper, and Eve not being bonded, just like calls up Bob and says, hey Bob, deploy this code for me. And then instead of being E1, that's block B1, but it's still contentious. And like, so in our chain, the way you can tell is that the same channel gets accessed in both blocks, or like in Bitcoin, the same UTXO gets spent in both blocks or something like that.
But my question is, so if they're not calculating the result, because this is another validator set, they can trust these other validators, and they can say, okay, when they finalize the block for C1, then we can decide what is correct for E1. Does this make sense?
It's starting to. So you're saying, yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm not so sure how they can say, okay, we are another validator set and we are deciding that E1 is correct. But they must observe what are these other validators are doing, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so imagine this. Let's imagine that like, I'm going to undo this in a second, but imagine that the weights are something like 50, 40, 20, and like 1 and 1. So like D and E are no longer zero weight validators, but they're clearly small fish, right?
Okay.
So it now makes sense that Eve could have deployed this block in here, right? Because she's a validator. And we've sent it back to like, we're one big happy Casper family with 5 bonded validators. And we have these conflicting blocks. Now, like, under the assumption that I stated earlier where everybody's seen everybody else's block, this is definitely an intentional double spend or something. But we've talked in the past about how conflicts like this can get in there accidentally. Like if C and E just created their blocks around the same time without having seen each other yet or something like that. And so we know how to detect those sort of conflicts, and we know how to resolve them by sort of like figuring out which block is the main parent and building off of it. And so all those rules still apply exactly the same as before, even once we switch these weights to 0.
But who would ever build off of a 0-weighted block?
Yeah, good. Well, yeah, great question. So no one would build off the 0-weighted block if there's contention, right? Like Bob's block was 0-weighted and Charlie still built on it because like, it's a perfectly good transaction that Charlie might care to interact with, and it was non-contentious, so we might as well take it in. Now, in terms of Eve having made this 0-weighted block, no one would build on it like Alice, Bob, or Charlie. Yeah. But the subtlety here is that not everyone thinks it's a 0-weighted block. If you ask Dave is playing a different Casper, and he says Eve's block has weight 3 and Charlie's has weight 0, so Dave might choose, or in fact, in this case, would choose to build off of Eve's block next.
But they are on the same. They're on the same deck, so D and D they can decide whatever they want, but they cannot put it in the deck because the ABC will not allow it.
Yeah, are there different DAGs associated with the two games at Casper that are going on here?
That's a good question. So I'm imagining this being a single DAG.
Yeah, okay.
So one way to think of this is like to start to conceive of it as we got in this situation by accident because of like a bug or a failed Genesis ceremony or something. I think that might even be why I started to think of it, but then it turned out to maybe be interesting. So like, if you just imagine we're trying to all build the same DAG, but somehow we got wires crossed and we like actually don't even agree on who the validators are. You know, like Tomislav, if you're Bob here, you know, your node knows one particular pink set of validators and is going to play Casper according to it. And then maybe like, you know, Jay and I are Dave and Eve here. We've got our own validators thinking of a different Casper set. Like something is going to happen, right? We're still gossiping blocks together. And so I'm basically trying to explore that scenario and wonder if it's going to be useful.
So are the red and blue kind of like different addresses basically? Like can Dave just choose if he wants to deploy with his red address or his blue address?
Oh, that's a good question. That's not how I was thinking of it, although that might be a useful or even better way to think of it. Well, so here's what I was thinking of. By putting a block, so Dave, like the Dave column represents a key pair. So D basically is like our human readable way of saying Dave's public key. So to put like this block D1, to put something in the D column means that Dave created the block, signed it with his public key, and like submitted it to the gossip network, hoping that it'll go into the DAG. And then the difference between the pink numbers and the blue numbers is basically like, it's a matter of which Casper contract you're watching. So like in our chain, they deploy the Casper, they have this contract called Make POS. It's like the Casper proof of stake contract. It goes into the Genesis block and everything. So it's basically, the scenario is like, imagine they accidentally deployed 2 of those. They work exactly the same way, same fork choice rule, same, you know, slashing condition, same whatever it is. The only difference is who happens to be the bonded validators in each one of the sets. Yeah. And so then basically we're saying like, let's see how this DAG grows, assuming that Alice, Bob, and Charlie are watching one of the Casper contracts thinking it's the real one, and Dave and Eve are watching a different one thinking it's the real one.
But you're saying that they can use the same hash from the parent and start building the same DAG.
Yeah, that's right. They have exactly the same DAG. That's right. That's
because
right.
Yeah, I feel like they could be 2 separate DAGs. Like
yeah, so if we make them 2 separate DAGs and 2 separate Caspers, then it feels like we're just talking about 2 separate blockchains that are both running at the same time.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that how can they agree on the same hash? Because you know, if the other validator set creates another block, this block cannot be parent from the first ever. Or am I mistaken?
Because yeah, let's run through that. So that sounds like a good scenario. Is there enough blocks in the DAG now to illustrate it, or should I add anything?
So you're saying there's basically 2 bonding contracts in the same, I'm not even sure what to call it, like in the same Genesis file or something? Yeah,
so in an R-chain situation, I'm thinking, yeah, there are like 2 identical proof of stake contracts, both in the tuple space.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, in the easiest way is to say they both got there from Genesis, maybe one got deployed later. I think at the moment we should think about like from Genesis, probably.
Yeah.
Can we see this as a simpler example? So if we have a validator set like we have now, and in a sense, you're saying that you will be able to create another validator set that can also put something in the DAG. And this should not happen.
Well, the first important step is that I'm allowing, even apart from the blue numbers or a second Casper or anything, I'm allowing anyone to put blocks into the DAG. Even like if you only look at the pink Casper, even Dave and Eve can put stuff into the DAG. It's just that they have 0 weight. So like when Dave put this block into the DAG, from pink Casper's perspective, it's just some block with 0 weight. It's not going to do anything unless a weighted validator acknowledges it by building on it, like Charlie did.
But you can do it this now also. You can just say, okay, this is something that I want to add to that, right? And send the validator deploy and.
There's a subtle difference though. Yeah. So you're exactly right. But the subtlety is in the current R-chain model, if I'm Dave, and I think this is the same in Ethereum and most blockchains, like if I'm Dave, someone who's not a bonded validator, then I sign my individual code, I send it over to Charlie out of band somehow, just over the internet, but it's not part of the blockchain protocol. And then Charlie signs the whole deploy with his key, the validator key, and throws it into the tuple space. And because Charlie's a validator, every block starts its life with at least some non-zero amount of weight. So what the difference, the first difference is that now Dave, who's not a bonded validator, or one way to think of that is bonded with zero weight, Dave doesn't have to send his deploy to Charlie out of band and have Charlie re-sign it. Dave could just sign it himself and put it directly into the DAG. And so that little change doesn't have anything to do with the second proof of stake, but it opens us up to have this second proof of stake scenario.
So I have one comment and one question. The comment is, if this DAG were purple, I think maybe we would all understand a little bit better what was going on.
Oh, are the colors hard to?
Well, I'm just saying, because then it would be like a blue and a red. Okay, that was the joke, but either way, this is a stupid joke.
I see what you're saying.
Oh no, but serious question though. If we have validators with zero weight that can propose blocks to the DAG, does that open us up to any like DOS attack vectors?
That's a good question.
Because then you could just have like a bot that generates as many validators as it wants and just proposes like whatever blocks. Yeah, just to try and overwhelm the network.
Imagine that the zero-weighted validator thing only works for validators in some set, in some proof of stake contract.
Yeah.
As opposed to just anybody at all,
Okay. So these validators have to be present at the time of genesis or whatever to have to be zero weight as well.
Or basically just have some stake in some pool.
Oh. Yeah, that's a good idea. So Jay, you're saying like there's still a bonding process, even if it turns out you're staking no rev or whatever, but there's it's almost like an applying to be a validator, like the quorum has to let you in or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it would either be that, or you would have to submit like a transaction fee for, some.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like some small borderline negligible cost per block, but if you make a billion of them, it sums to be like.
Yeah, that would be a good way to prevent that attack vector. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
I'm thinking that validators' trust could be applied to this multiple Casper instance where they might want to wait. D and E may not trust A, B, and C. And so they join whatever. But so in that sense, you're making the weighting somewhat subjective.
Oh yeah. If these guys are staking, if the two Caspers are using different staking tokens, you can imagine like the relative weights of, although they don't formally interact with each other in any way, you can imagine like the blue Casper knowing about the pink Casper and part of their algorithm being like, well, look, the pink Casper is heavier than us. We're going to go along with them in most cases unless we have a good reason not to. But then like the price of the blue token goes up and the relative weights like kind of shift or something. That would be trippy.
Oh, so but you're saying that they know each other. They can say, we can decide this, but also we can decide something else.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's a formal part of the protocol, but I think in reality, validator economics would probably cause that to happen, at least for the big Caspers.
Yeah.
Another thing we might consider eventually, although I don't think we're ready yet, but I was kicking around the idea of doing something like this, where like Charlie is actually bonded in both Caspers, so then he has weight, with the blue crowd and the pink crowd, but like most of the other validators don't, or something like that. Charlie would be like the Marco Polo here. You know, he has weight with people on the one end of the Silk Road and also weight with the people on the other end.
What would be really interesting is if his block was in a conflict, I guess.
Oh yeah.
I can't think of the exact circumstance where one set wouldn't accept him because he didn't have enough weight, but the other set did accept him because he had more weight than his conflicting block.
Yeah, that would be oh yeah, like he could even get slashed out of one or something. I wonder if that's a thing. Well,
now I'm thinking that my thinking about validator rotation was really about that you can switch. You know, you can have blue validators for some blocks, and then you switch to red validators, and they can do something, but you know exactly who will decide.
Yeah,
that was my thinking when you said this mix.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so one thing to always consider is that like these could be the same person. Like Charlie and Dave could actually be the same person. Yeah. Just using two key pairs to bond in like two different Casper instances or something. Yeah. So okay, so I want to try to. This is basically you guys are caught up to speed on everything I've been thinking about. Now is where I don't really know what's going to happen. So I wanted to see like let's just say Bob is going to build a new block and he wants to decide where to build it. And I guess like so far, let's say it's kind of independent. It doesn't really have anything to do with either transactions C or E. And so I thought we would need to score. I don't remember exactly how the scoring works. That's a little bit embarrassing, how the ghost scoring works. But I know it's something like, I forget whether we do it from the top or the bottom.
You start at Genesis, right? So you can trace like the history of the 4 choices.
Yeah. Okay. So Genesis. So what is the way to Genesis or the score of Genesis then?
Well, red Casper or blue Casper?
Oh yeah, let's score red Casper first.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. 11 for red Casper.
Okay. Because everybody's built off of it, I guess, right? Okay. So.
Yeah.
There we go. And then, oh yeah, right. And so B1
should still have 11. Yeah. And C, only A and C built off of that. So 6, right?
Oh, yes.
A and C. Yeah.
Yeah. And then A1's 5.
Yeah.
And then I think we even have to give D1 a score of 7. A pink score of 7.
A pink score of 7, yeah. Because, oh, wait, is it 12 or 7? Because C and A were built on that.
Yeah, 7 is already the sum of C and A.
Oh, yeah, sorry, right.
And in fact, we even need to give a pink score here, I guess, to be complete, but I think it's 0.
Yeah, 0. Yep.
So then, I guess, like, Bob probably builds B2 off of here.
Oh, wait, this is kind of interesting now because the C1 and D1 both have the same pink weight, right? So Bob could presumably just build off of D1.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It depends what Bob's depending on, right? If he needs anything in A1 or C1,
yeah,
he should build off of A1.
Yeah.
But he could also,
just build directly from D1. Yeah.
And then and that changes weights now too.
Yeah. So then D1 would change to 11.
Yeah.
Or not 11, but wait a second. No, well, it would change to.
For some reason, I can't erase this. So
would it change to 11?
D1, well, let's see. What pink validator? Yeah, all the pink validators
so
have built on.
Yeah.
So that has to become 11. I'm just going to do this. For some reason, I can't erase right now. Absolute value of 7.
All right. This is a weight of red validators, right?
Yeah. Block scores according to red validators, and I guess this one's 4.
That one's 4, yeah.
And how you get 7 for D1?
For D1, we had 7 originally because, sorry, you can't see what I'm pointing at, but here, I'll do it this way. So D1 was built on by 2 pink validators. Before we drew this latest block, it was built on by these guys, which are Charlie block, and an Alice block. So we summed the 5 and the 2. Well, and we summed the 0 from Dave, really.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I don't know what to do next, but one fun thing might be to write blue scores up here.
This is interesting now because any pink validator that goes should build off of that D1 branch, right? Because it now has the most weight out of all of the others.
It's definitely true that D1 is the heaviest pink-wise of all of these blocks, but isn't the rule supposed to be that you're supposed to build on the heaviest tip?
The heaviest tip.
Because like when you're doing Ghost, you always have heavy shit up at the top, and then as the true spreads out, they get lighter. But you're supposed to.
Yeah, because from D1, then we have the choice of going to C1, which is a 7, or B2, which is a 4, right? So then, yeah, you would end
E1,
up
which is a 0.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you go. Yeah, oh, that's exactly right. Yeah. So you go to C1, and then you have the same choice, but you only have 1 up. Oh.
Yeah, and if you've seen all of those, then you would build off of A1, I guess.
Right. So by Bob building that B2 block at the bottom off of D1, that means that Bob must have either didn't acknowledge seeing those other 2 blocks yet, or is equivocating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interesting. So Bob could have built off of E1, right? I mean, if he wanted to include that stuff in his justifications or whatever.
Yeah. So okay. So that's a really good point. So yeah, maybe before we draw all of that stuff in, like you're saying, what if Bob had done like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we assume that he has not cited either of these other 2 in his justifications, I think that's perfectly valid. Oh, and this is a perfect example too of like when a pink bonded validator like Bob might choose to build off a 0 weight, according to Pink Casper, a 0 weight block. So I guess in this scenario, either Bob didn't see Charlie's block, or, for whatever reasons, personal or malicious or whatever, just likes Eve's block better.
Yeah.
So what would the scores look like in this case?
Bob and Eve could be the same person, right? So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great point. So if we did it this way, now B2 has a score of 4, E gets a score of 4, and this is still 11. Because it still gets Bob's weight, just via a different path.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's have, like, Dave make a block now. So we'll call it D2. And I want to write blue weights in. So we've got 7 here, 7 here, 4 here. No, that doesn't make sense.
Still 7, right? Because
yeah, you're right. Dave and Eve both built on this one.
Here,
3 here,
3 there. Yeah.
Oh, that 0 is outdated. And these are all 0s, I think. Because we don't have anyone building there.
Yeah.
So then the question is, where does D2 go? And options, I guess, are off of A1, off of B2, off of C1, off of B1.
Yeah, it probably depends on if they're playing blue or pink Casper.
Yeah, right. Well, Dave is a bonded validator in the blue world.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Well, okay, so let's just say Dave is like following the honest ghost. Oh, wow. Yeah, so let's say Dave is following the like honest ghost rules and has seen all these blocks. Like in that case, the proper place to build, I think, is right here.
Yeah.
It would be B2 though, right? Because that's the tip.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, nice. Okay, so then that updates all the weights, or many of the weights. This one becomes 4. This one also becomes 4.
Mhm.
And then this one becomes 7.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I was just thinking that, if we did do something like this, where Charlie is bonded in both Caspers, this is actually potentially a dangerous thing to do for Charlie, because he could get into a place where, if he honestly follows the pink fort choice tip rule, it says build one place, and if he honestly follows the blue one, it says build a different place.
Mm.
The question is, can he do the both things?
Yeah.
Possible, or
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, in multi-parent Casper, you can, if they don't conflict, you could build a block off of both of them.
Because I'm thinking that this zero weights block will become more and more often when networks,
Yeah,
when
right.
DAG is bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they will never, be part of the other validators, right?
So you're saying you think this will sort of inevitably split?
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about A1 and C1. They will never become part of the blue validators. Can they?
Well, that's a good question.
A1 and C1.
Yeah, so A1 is over on the left here, I guess, and it's.
Wait. Well, what if Bob builds another block?
Whoops. One thing, the thing in my mind is that they can still flip flop. It's always legal to switch sides as long as your justifications work out.
Yeah.
Where did you want?
Well,
Oh,
let's see. Oh, I guess no, never mind now, because Bob would have to build off of only his own block, right? Oh, no, sorry. What if Alice builds another block? Because Alice would build off of, say she's, seen everything at this point. And so she would go to build off of what, D2, I think?
D2. Oh, yeah, we didn't update all the pink numbers. D2, what's the pink score on D2?
It's a little bit.
0.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 0. Oh, yeah, duh. Well, oh, yeah, you're right.
It's a little bit hard to say.
So Alice would start at Genesis, go to B1, go to D1, go to C1, go to A1.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because, okay, right, yeah.
Maybe we could set up, so we might be at a point where assuming that everyone has seen everything is no longer a good idea to create interesting diagrams. Because I'm thinking about somehow Alice is able to flip-flop at some point, right?
And Bob, when Bob sees A1 and C1, he will also switch.
Yeah.
Right? He will say, okay, this is the correct diagram, not the
That's
A1.
right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Yeah, so maybe that is what we should build next.
Yeah, and when you said when we assume that all messages are seen by everyone, then in a sense we don't need consensus anymore, right?
You're right.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a great point. So that was I thought that would be a simplifying assumption, but that was probably just kind of made it trivia, simplified it a little too much.
Wait, so the claim here is that at some point these two Casper instances will just naturally bifurcate, basically, right? Kind of all of the pink validators will tend towards one part of the DAG, and all of the blue validators will tend towards another part of the DAG.
Yeah, I guess your thinking behind that is if it does happen at all, then it'll only like get worse from there because blue will continue to build on blue and has no reason exactly to go back to the red because there's no way to create enough stake on that side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, I mean, intuitively, that sounds right.
I think this
Yeah.
example has helped solidify my intuition that that's correct also.
Yeah.
But another thing worth considering now is like we've set this up in a fairly extreme case where the bonding doesn't overlap at all. And I mentioned a little bit like what if it overlapped a little bit. But then another whole scenario is like, you know, the bonds could be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then like the blue bonds could be, you know, like 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And now we have a lot of validators that are actually interested in both worlds. And I'm curious if, you know, if the dynamics would be different then, or, oh, that could even be a cool question. Like under what circumstances are they more prone to like, I don't know, save the marriage, stay together on one DAG. Yeah. Well, I think I've shared as much of that idea as I have prepared. So if you guys want to explore that scenario more, I'm fine with that. Or if you have other stuff, I feel like I got to share that part.
Well, I would also just be interested, I guess, to paint an example where this would be useful, or like, you know, what you're imagining could emerge from it.
Yeah. So my sort of nebulous idea is that it takes a long time and a lot of computation to come to global consensus, and a lot of shit we don't need global consensus on. And it might be useful to just have like me be able to make a quick transaction at my local supermarket and you know, like get consensus over the validators that are here and local without having to, you know, wait for the validators that are running in China and Russia and South Africa to see my message and play Casper. Like, it seems like that just adds a lot of latency. And so the idea is that, like, first of all, don't even bother getting that global consensus at all if you don't need it. You know, like if I have a bunch of transactions here local, it's almost like state channels, right? Like way less security, smaller validator set and everything.
Mm-hmm. But there's the sort of the caveat that you still kind of see all the other transactions. They're just not really like considered in the proof of stake, right?
Yeah.
Is this the same relationship between parent and child namespaces?
Yeah, you're saying namespaces?
Yeah, because I'm thinking this in terms of namespaces, because you have some namespaces that you can make all of your transactions that are not in conflict with some other namespace. So you can just say, okay, this is completely isolated in my area, and because I remember that Greg and Vlad were discussing this on Casper, how this should be, how this relationship should work. You know, if parent validator set confirmed some block, so child must accept it, right? But they're discussing this, so this is not completely clear, right?
Yeah.
And then Greg said that each transaction really means another namespace. You're creating right this transaction and put your like a deposit in this another namespace, and then you can do all of the transactions that are not related to anything, because you don't have this this money you don't have because you gave it to this special namespace.
Yeah, so that seems super similar, right? This thought arose out of namespace thinking. The one, like, I know some of the models, I don't know if I'm thinking of the same thing that you were just describing, but I know at one point Archain was thinking about this model where there was like a really formal handoff between like one namespace and another. You know, like something becomes finalized in the pink group and some transaction happens and the blue group acknowledges it and then finalizes something, and the pink transaction gives one final act, and then there was like a handoff or something. And I was sort of hoping for like a more loosey-goosey way to do that without the latency of finalizing a block in the pink space and finalizing the block in the blue space.
But in this sense of namespaces, I see this as a, you know, you're separating your wallet, right? For example, and you're saying this half of this wallet I will put in another namespace, which is totally isolated from everything else. Yeah. So we can all go to this special namespace and do all of our transactions because each of us will give their share, you know. So in this namespace we can do whatever we want because we are not sharing any information to the rest of the network because, you know, we put our money at front to work with. In that sense, I'm thinking about namespace.
Yeah. So, yeah. They seem super similar. Hang on one second, guys.
Yeah. But what you're saying is, it seems that this is like an implementation of namespaces, right?
It's like a specific one though, right? Because in namespaces, you don't necessarily see all the other transactions. It's kind of like an implied signal by the value of the coin in a namespace.
Yeah. Because if you have your wallet that works in the whole network, you must prove somehow that you're not spending, you know, in one city your whole wallet and in another city the same wallet, you know.
Yeah.
You must lock it somehow or say, you know, this is.
Yeah, so I guess in this model, this is achieved with the zero weight blocks. It's basically like, well, yeah, so in namespaces, the way I understand them in our chain, at least what it was supposed to be is that you could like lock it right into a namespace and then that would give value to whatever that coin becomes. And so that's kind of like your proof of stake or whatever, versus this model, the proof that you're not double spending is that you're basically just showing all the transactions you've ever done through blocks. So yeah, it effectively becomes the same like chain, I guess, with the caveat that it's a zero weighted block, just so that you can see all the transactions that do happen.
Because I see problem when you said you present all of your transactions, right? And that makes sense. But if you have more than one set of validators, you can present, you know, all of your transactions in one validator set, but the other one just, you know, keeping the transactions.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How can you prove these other validators, you know, this is okay, you know?
Yeah.
You're not building the deck. This is not on your deck, but you know, how can you say you can trust this other deck?
There has to be like some measure of trust based on the value of the two tokens, if there are two tokens in this model, which I guess Joshi was kind of saying that it's more like two proof of stake contracts in the same chain.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it definitely as two proof of stake contracts in the same chain. I haven't put enough thought in to really have a sense of whether it would be necessary or even possible or ideal to have two separate tokens, or if it would be better to have the same one token or something. So I almost wonder if I didn't spend enough time talking about like zero weight validators before jumping into the two Caspers. But I was sort of envisioning this world where like some small number of validators are bonded and then the rest of us are not. And we just submit our transaction, like submit our blocks out there. And it turns out that most of the blocks in the DAG are zero weight, but it's okay that most of them are zero weight because, you know, like once a bonded validator builds somewhere down the DAG, that weight, like that score applies to all of its ancestors, even though most of them were zero weight when they started. Like they'll get picked up into the chain or something like that.
Yeah, I guess what Tomislav is just saying is if that block is, a double spend or something in the blue network, which is kind of the point we were trying to bring up here with the conflicts in one block but not the other. Like if blue is double spending in their own chain and then they submit it to red and red accepts it.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, you could imagine. Oh, yeah. The only part I didn't quite understand was that in their own chain, or well, I guess because they've kind of become their own chains now. You're saying, right? Like they've diverged, and it seems like they're not going to come back together. So it's almost like two different chains.
Yeah, I can't exactly like paint the tree in my head right now, but the idea would just be like, yeah, you could imagine, a whole bunch of people in like Korea, just we don't know them, and let's say there's like 4 of them, and somehow they get on their own proof of stake network, and they have some tokens, and they just start double spending them a whole bunch, and all of those transactions go unvalidated by anyone else except themselves.
Yeah.
And then when they spend them on our chain, they have 0 weight, or when they spend them on the red, as a 0 weight, then nobody actually checks them because they're 0 weighted.
Oh wait, okay. So I think the idea basically is like if you're a red validator and you're gonna accept. So you're saying like they do a bunch of sketchy stuff that no one else is watching, and then they come and try to spend some of those like UTXOs back in like the. If we think of the red world as like the real world or our home world or whatever. So before any weighted red validator builds on those blocks in order to like, accept the payment or respend an accepted payment or something, all the normal validation rules should still apply. And so like, let's say Dave and Eve are over there doing a bunch of, invalid transactions. No one's watching because they're not in our main pink proof of stake network. Finally, they build a block that like takes some of those fraudulently generated tokens they just created and tries to spend them, send them to some smart contract that's well validated with among the pink validators. So like before that transaction goes through, before the fraudulent coins go into the smart contract or something, like whatever pink validator is going to build on that transaction should go back and retroactively validate all of the blocks. Like I think isn't that the rule for anytime you build a block? Like it's your responsibility to make sure that all of its ancestors are valid, lest you potentially get slashed.
It just kind of removes like the usefulness of it, though, right? Because then you're validating everything that you were trying to optimize away from.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But I get like the idea like in a state channel, I mean, the idea of a state channel is that the whole way through you're proving like that every step inductively is valid from the last step at least.
Yeah.
So if you changed like the state transition function or something here to work as a state channel, then maybe it could work if you could somehow prove that each transaction built off of the last one, and then you could have like a zero knowledge kind of proof, just submitting the final result back onto the chain.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think the piece I wasn't putting together was that when you have someone go back and revalidate all the stuff that's been, not validated in Pink World yet, that basically redoes all the optimism. Like that brings back all the work that we were hopefully not going to have to do for that separate blue. Yeah, I didn't put that together yet. I think you're right.
Yeah, and you're saying that this pink validator set can build their own part of the deck, and they can submit this to the red ones, and they can check all of these transactions, and they can say, okay, this is not only one block. It's like a big chunk of deck that the validator can validate and put in the red deck, like a normal deploy that all the clients are doing. For perspective of the red validator, the pink one will give him part of the deck, their own blocks. And as you said, the red ones can validate all of the transactions, and they can say, okay, it's not conflicting. We will just put it in the DAG. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
It is not one small transaction. It's like a much bigger one, but it also can be, as Jay was saying, it can also be for each transaction. But this makes it the part of the only one DAG.
Yeah.
You know, it seems that the pink ones are the childs of the red one, because the red one have the main voice.
You're saying that like the blue ones are the child of the red one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost seems like that's a consequence of they just didn't have as much weight, right? They're just overall lighter. Or is that true? Yeah, why did it seem that way?
From perspective of the red ones.
Oh, maybe
Yeah,
you're saying like each one of them mutually considers the other one the child shard? Like the red
I was
one
thinking
is
that the whole,
the child?
I was thinking the whole set. The blue ones are the childs of the red ones, the whole set.
Why? But why not the other way? Why not the red ones are the childs of the blue ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was assuming that the red ones will not allow to put anything in the DAG.
Yeah, but that could go both ways too, right? Either group could sort of outgroup the other one.
Yeah.
So I think I missed something here, because we were talking about having to, if we want to take some blue transactions and put them into the, red acknowledged portion of the DAG, that we would have to revalidate all of the transactions. But is that really true if the blue validators are also playing by exactly the same Casper rules? Don't they present all the justifications exactly the way that they need to be, even if they were a part of the red chain? We're just like thinking different weights, or maybe I'm missing something there. I'm not really sure.
But if they are part of the same chain, isn't there going to be a time in a DAG when red ones will put the blue ones inside, or the other way around?
Yeah, and like say the blue chain or the blue proof of stake group is the one that's trying to like double spend, then I mean they could still follow correct Casper rules and still double spend, right? Like,
yeah, because they don't know what is happening on the red one, right? They don't have control of the red ones.
Yeah, but even just on their own, like you can have a proper looking Casper DAG that still double spends just by like the state transition function underneath.
But before finalization, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, one of the two conflicting spends would get orphaned off.
Yeah,
but if you had a bad acting validator group.
Oh yeah, where they're like not where they're like building on conflicting blocks without slashing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how would the other group detect that group had
acting? Yeah. So
but, isn't that baked into the protocol? I mean, we're talking about like not following the protocol and then somehow hoping that these two like validator groups can interact. And I mean, fundamentally they can interact at that point. They're not following the same protocol. Like I said, I think I'm missing something.
As Jay, you're saying that the blue ones can decide to not follow the protocol, right? And they can say everything is fine, but the red ones cannot know it.
Yeah, because the idea is that red doesn't want to have to validate all the transactions in the blue network, right?
Yeah. So the whole set of validators, the blue ones, can be like the bad actors.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah. me make sure I get that scenario. So let Eve here set up a completely legitimate Casper proof of stake contract. They claim to follow it, maybe even for a while they do follow it. At some point, collude. They generate a bunch of tokens. Because they're colluding, they don't slash each other. The invalid blocks go into their little portion of the DAG. And then after it's long and sufficiently complex to re-verify, one of those fraudulent coins comes back over into Pink World, and then like Pink validators have this choice to make of like, wow, am I really going to go back and revalidate all of that? Or, oh, well, maybe that's part of it. Maybe like if you have a long side chain that hasn't been back on the main chain for a while, like you just have to properly incentivize with like a high transaction fee the Pink validators to accept it or something.
But this is the same situation if you have a validator from the same set that is, you know, it's not online, and he was accepting a bunch of transactions, and now it's back online, and you know, now it has a bunch of blocks.
Yeah, right.
Okay, guys, I got a dip. It's been great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
See you.
Good. Jay.
Bye.
See you.
So it's not related. I mean, it's related to the idea of how do we do local transactions independent of global transactions, and
Yeah.
I guess Thomas's work with the GRCP interface got me thinking about talking between forks or charts where we have multiple DAGs that we're dealing with, specifically with respect to the collab, where 99% of the stuff done by robot, we don't want to put on testnet or mainnet. It's local, so to speak. And yet, when necessary, we can propose to testnet or mainnet.
But the question is, are they part of the same deck? I mean, I don't mean part of the same deck. Yeah, they're part of the same deck, but are they ever converge?
Well, the way I'm looking at it is a subset of the collab shard would be on testnet or mainnet, would be proposed there and accepted, and part of it wouldn't be. So it would have, they're not the same in that they would have a separate bag, but they have overlap.
So in that sense, I'm thinking about the wallet. So if someone sends you money from the wallet that is not on your network, how will you know that you will get your money?
Well, I mean, we clearly have a separate token.
Yeah, exactly.
We can have a conversion, so to speak. I mean, that would be on top of it. I mean, you know, you're really, in order
but the convert.
No, test rev or rev, you would have to interact with the wallet on that chart or on that fork. And so, you know, that's a...
But this is interesting to have a conversion. So in a sense, the conversion is a relationship with you know, you have two DAGs that are growing, and you connect one point to the other. So you can say, you know, from this point, I can check this other path in the DAG is something that I believe is correct or true, right? So you can make connection, and you can say, okay, I will on my part of the DAG, I will change these numbers, and this will reflect this on the another branch, something like that. Although,
yeah, that almost seems more like, so there's this concept of like a bridge chain.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure what exactly you need to compute, so you can make this connection, right? This is unclear to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to have the notion of a remote channel or a proxy for a remote channel, which.
But also the problem is for validators.
You could implement readily with the mechanism, the gRPC mechanism that you're implementing, right, Thomas?
Well, I'm thinking more about the Kent's comments in Casper. He was explaining that first of all, it's difficult to know in which state you are, right? Because you don't have the whole deck, for example, and he was explaining that you must search much bigger part of the deck because you don't know where you are. So I'm not completely sure how this works, but it seems that there should be some kind of a restriction, so you don't have to check the whole deck because someone sent you, something. I'm thinking that
you're proposing a tuple space. So if it, I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about, remote channel activity. You really can't validate, right?
Yeah, one solution there is like to have a trusted third party, someone who just, makes the appropriate transaction on like both chains. And then another way is to like put another, we're good now at identifying situations where there's a trusted third party and replacing that third party with a blockchain. So like, you have this scenario where there's two blockchains you want to interact. We know how to do it with a third party. Well, instead of a third party, make it a third blockchain that replaces that third party.
Yeah,
I think that's like the bridge chain technique, I think.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, well, we're faced with that with robot. So
yeah, I think in terms of like practical design, the best way to start is to start with the trusted third party, and then when it becomes necessary or prudent, then try to upgrade to something trustless.
I mean, the simple mechanism is just to be able to deploy to both chains or one chain or whatever. It's I'm not sure that is much of a problem.
So Jim, let me make sure I understood the scenario. So you're thinking about how, like in the Colab server, we use Robot to run Rolang, and you're thinking about having maybe like two separate instances, one that's like, actual testnet or mainnet or whatever it is. But most of the time, that's not what people want to use. Most of the time, we're like screwing around with our Rolang or something, wanting to use a private space. But in some number of occasions, we want to take something that we've done in that private space and either like reproduce the same thing on mainnet or somehow like move a token over to mainnet or something like that. Is that what you're trying to accomplish, or did I mishear it?
Yeah, we deploy locally things on the collab shard or fork.
Yeah.
But then explicitly propose to other chains. So we have some code that we have run or whatever. Now we say we want to finalize it. We want it to be global. So we submit it to mainnet, whatever.
Yeah.
But this means that this exists in two locations. I'm thinking about GitHub repository. You know,
Yeah, no problem.
sorry.
What were you saying about GitHub, Thomas?
So yeah, I was referring to commits in GitHub repository. You cannot easily, if you copy something from another repository, you cannot say anything about commits or hashes. You can copy it, but you cannot say put this on this hash.
Yeah,
it cannot do it because it's a different it's a different deck. So
yeah, you're talking about in how it's sort of fundamentally different for me to like fork your repo and then start making, in that case, I know all the history of the commits and what one's chained after one. And that's different from if I'm like, oh, this is nice code and I Control-C all of it and Control-V all of it into my own thing and start from there. Because now I have like only a snapshot of whatever commit I was looking at, not your full history or something like that.
Yeah,
it's like Genesis, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can do some kind of a merge, right? This is multi-parent, but you must admit all the hash chain from this other stuff. You must admit it. You must calculate it. You must, right? So you can be sure that it's correct. Yeah. Because it will become part of your deck for the future.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Yeah, you must hold everything that you can prove later. Right.
Seems like if you could, if you could somehow know about what you don't need to know about.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like you can prove one chain with a hash or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's I definitely do not know the nitty gritty, but people are talking about interesting things about like starks and snarks where, you can prove like super interesting and complex things in zero knowledge. And then the verification time is, linear, even though the proof was like pretty expensive or something. So like that might be starting to get at what you're talking about. Oh yeah, that seems pretty relevant because then you can prove like, this chain of 20 transactions or whatever happened legitimately and it's cheap to compute back on, whatever the main net or main chain is that you're trying to prove it on.
Are you saying that you can you can only use some part of that proof that you need and import in your tag, right?
Yeah, the idea is that like the prover has to do the full amount of work, whatever, whatever that is, that might be large or something. But then there's verifying the proof is a much better runtime or something. So I've seen it used not in this exact scenario, but in the scenario of like, I want to make this DApp, but some little part of it is super computationally expensive. And so instead of doing it on chain, I'm going to do it on my laptop and then just have a little, lighter verification of that thing happen on chain.
So I had an interesting thought. I don't know exactly how this applies, but that almost sounds like how proof of work works, right? Like it's super difficult to produce the block, but then it's really easy to verify the block because you're just like verifying that the hash is what it's supposed to be. So maybe, we have like these proof of stake, different instances of Casper that are running on the same DAG. And if we need to do like transfers between the different validator sets, there's some proof of work thing that could happen in between or something. And we were talking a while ago about how is it possible to even like mix these two ideas? And maybe that's where something like that comes in,
I would think that the every validator should give you the same value for the proof, and that's proof enough.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting method. Oh yeah, that's kind of like, that's sort of similar to like Greg's example error correcting code, where you just triplicate the bit, right? You just triplicate the computation, and when enough, or n-locate, and when enough of the validators come back with the same answer, that's good evidence that it's the right answer.
Yeah, the problem, where you have the problem is when the namespaces overlap, and it's a double spend, or I guess what really concerns me more is the non-determinacy differences that different validators will get, and how you recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's our version of the double spend, I think, right? Resolving non-determinacy differently.
Yeah.
But is it the same situation? Because I'm thinking that if I'm spending reps from my wallet, if I send this transaction to a validator, there is no. It's very clear what I want, right? There is no nothing to nothing that validator can say that is
non-deterministic is what you're saying, right? That should not be a non-deterministic kind of transaction. Yeah, I agree with that. I guess I was thinking, so in Bitcoin you have all these UTXOs, right? Unspent transaction outputs that just represent coins that like people own. So like if I want to send you some coins, I consume one of my UTXOs, and if I'm sending you exactly that number of coins, then I create a new UTXO for you, or like if I'm sending you some of them, I create two new ones, or like yours and my change. And so you can think of this like state of the Bitcoin machine as the set of UTXOs, and then what gets recorded in the blockchain is like the changes to that state, right? Like the actual spends. And the analogy that I try to draw with the row VM is that instead of thinking of all these UTXOs, like our UTXO set is basically the tuple space. It's a bunch of sends and a bunch of receives that are in the tuple space. And so a double spend is when I try to consume a UTXO twice, because you can only consume a UTXO once, right? So that's what makes it a double spend. So like the equivalent of double spending a UTXO in our chain is like, well, instead of a UTXO, I have something in the tuple space, like a send basically. And then I try to, spend that send or consume that send twice by like, marrying it up with one 4 over here and a different 4 over here.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like how I've drawn the analogy. Because I agree, Thomas, like in Bitcoin, spending a coin is like the atomic thing, whereas in our chain or Rolang, spending a coin is a multi-step computation with many COM events. But yeah, but it should be totally deterministic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I keep thinking back to the case of a counter. Okay, if you have a counter, if you're trying to create a counter, how do we do that? If we have all kinds of transactions coming from everywhere that increment this counter, everyone's going to get a wrong value except one guy.
Yeah.
And we have to somehow come consensus about what order they came in, and the whole block that that's submitted is
But
ultimately invalid.
But the order is not the crucial thing, right?
Well, it
because
is. If we all grab a ticket and get ticket number one,
then we're gonna fight for who gets to go when they call ticket number one, right? We got to get different tickets.
The validators that have the most weight are gonna win, right?
Yeah.
And who will use this block to create another one? And this was I thinking that the order is maybe not something that is always that will always decide. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, if we have some sequential order.
Yeah.
How to code this? You can give everyone ticket and then later decide what is the exact number.
Yeah, in that particular case, also you could have a contract that is like I'm picturing when you go in to like stand in line at the DMV or whatever, and you take that paper ticket out of the machine. So you can have a contract that represents that machine, and anyone can call it, and maybe we all call it at approximately the same time, and we don't know what order they're going to go in, but well, how does that work?
Yeah, but the problem is that
Casper will force an order there, right? Casper determines an order, and then we all get a unique ticket number.
Yeah, but you're sending to one validator and you will get the number 5, but I will get also the number 5 from other validators. So they can never decide, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of our tickets is going to get taken back then, right?
Yeah.
Box is going to get orphaned off. Yeah, that's a great point.
But you don't want this.
Yeah, that's right. You don't want that. Yeah, especially if
you're selling the tickets, and the half of the people will get the message. It's not available.
Yeah.
You must do it again.
So we still have all those same notions of like we had in Bitcoin. They're just a little different, right? It's like, don't consider the funds yours until 6 block confirmations. Don't consider that ticket yours until it gets finalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in reality, a UI should probably say like, the block where you received this ticket is now finalized. It's really yours, or something like that.
Yeah, but you also want to just if someone click that want to buy a ticket, you want to make this number somehow.
Yeah.
Not to say it, you failed. Try again.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
We didn't get your number in sequence. Sorry.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's a major issue.
How to do it? I'm not sure how to do it.
So, how does one know
in most
when
cases you can avoid forcing things to be sequential, and that's what we try to do with Roguelang.
Okay, but they don't have to be sequential. You're just giving the number for each ticket from 1 to 1,000. So, right?
Yeah.
You have one contract that's just giving the ticket, but with multiple validators,
Yeah, that's true.
So one interesting idea here is that what we care about in the take a ticket when you're waiting in line scenario is really that all the tickets are unique. We don't care that they're consecutive. And so that might mean that a counter is not the right thing to use. Like, I'm wondering if we could, if the ticket number can be some pseudo random, like a hash of, you know, some salt and the public key and some, you know, I don't know, whatever it is. And then, so like, oh, that's it. What I get what you were saying now about deciding the order later, right? We give a ticket with a number on it, and then the contract is responsible for saying what order they came in and calling them.
Yeah. For example, I'm not interested in exact number, but how you will say I have only 1,000 tickets. So you must have some counter.
Oh.
That must be also on the blockchain, and all the validators must have consensus on this number. But each validator will count their own.
Yeah. Yeah, so that, well, this is something interesting we could do in a Erlang hour, I guess, probably, where you code up like, well, we got to come up with clear constraints, right? Like, we want to give out exactly 1,000 tickets. We want them all to be unique. We want to have a total ordering over them eventually, and we definitely don't want to give out 1,001 tickets or something like that.
Yeah, this is an interesting exercise.
Yeah, how could you impose that if all of the validators are individually like doing these computations, because maybe they're each servicing different batches of 1,000 people, and how do you guarantee that only 1,000 global tickets? That's really interesting.
It's like, you know, we need some way to say, you know, get the certainty of the send that or being finalized or
maybe we can put them all in the par and just count them, and only the last few of them will fail, but all before will succeed.
Yeah, so you can call up and request a ticket and get an ACK with certainty, and it doesn't matter how many ACKs we get out. And then later you'll get a call back that says, "Good news, you've won the lottery. Here's a real ticket," or, you know, "Sorry, you didn't," or something.
Yeah. So in that case, maybe only the last one will fail, and you can handle them. Yeah.
So is it possible that we come to consensus on each one at a time? Like, like everybody comes to consensus on one, and then everybody comes to consensus on the second one, and then everybody comes to consensus on the third one. Like, I'm not saying this is the computationally optimal way of doing it, but maybe it is a way of doing it.
Yeah,
I think, you know, that there has to be a way of stipulating that you want a finalized value or whatever, send.
Maybe they don't have to agree on some exact value. Maybe they can agree that, you know, another ticket, it's someone brought another ticket, and we will, you know, save this to tuple space, and there is still tickets left. So I will put this in my block and everything is fine. And each validator can do the same, right? And eventually the first validator, eventually it will happen that the first validator will see, okay, there is not enough ticket, so I will not approve this transaction. And yeah.
Another thing to keep in mind is that I think the ultimate goal for the our chain platform is that
you know, we're all pretty used to like testnet now, and like I got to wait a minute for auto deploy and stuff like that. But the goal is that these blocks are going to be buzzing around like, you know, super fast, and that I think at some point it's acceptable user experience to be like, hey, I'd like a ticket, and then, you know, 10 seconds, you wait 10 seconds and find out like, well, there are no more available. The question is just like, where's that threshold? 10 minutes is definitely too long. 10 seconds is probably short enough, and you just gotta like.
And is it useful to? Yeah, but this is also problematic. I was thinking that you can you can send your transaction to multiple validators, but you don't want multiple tickets. You know, you don't want to do this. But you want to choose the fastest validator. You know, sneak your transaction in. You know? Not some lazy one.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But this can also be incentive to validators.
So we're really coming to a consensus on like a map of a ticket number and who owns the ticket, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I guess in that case, you maybe it's okay to send it to multiple people. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure.
Yeah. You're saying this is something that I have unique, and I will use it for all of my. This is not double spend. I'm just, you know, I want this ticket. You know?
That's right. That's just a single. That's a single spend many times.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Who
like,
can do it first?
Yeah, it's like buying, 10 lottery tickets. You're not going to win the lottery 7 times if 7 of them are a winner, right? You just win once.
But how can you convince the validator that this is the same transaction? You know, you must sign it, and this will be the different transaction.
Working on this right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Or something related, at least, because you should only be able to submit the same transaction once. Wow, no, wait, maybe this is different. He's working on some requirement where every time you submit a transaction, you can't have the same pair of public key and timestamp that you submit it, because those are the pseudo entropy sources that generate the unforgeable names. And so I know if you submit a transaction with the same public key and timestamp to the same validator, the second one gets rejected. What I don't know is if you submit the same code with the same public key but a different timestamp, what happens? And I guess maybe that's more like what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and also you can send to different validators, but before they made consensus, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because this other one will not know.
Right.
That's right. But, oh, I wonder how that gets resolved in the long. That really needs to get resolved. Because otherwise you can like recreate the same unforgeable name.
Yeah. And do they see this as exactly the same? Are there, you know, just to see this transaction, they can say, okay, is this the same from 2 different sources? And okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Today we have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the sessions when we sit around and talk about abstract ideas, and then we all do something cool next week.
We started from your example. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I was thinking of with that multiple Casper instances on the same block DAG is maybe there's some sort of migration of validators from like the blue set to the pink set or vice versa or something like that. And maybe like how could we make that work, you know?
Yeah, once you, like you're saying, if you bond and unbond or...
Yeah. And then and my thinking for that was maybe if there was the possibility of validator migration, then that would prevent this like bifurcation of the DAG from happening, because you can always have a blue validator turn into a pink validator later or something along those lines. But I'm not sure how you reconcile like all of these blue blocks that you created as the blue validator once you become the pink validator. I mean, you know, we're just speculating here anyways. So
yeah. And then do they need to analyze the whole DAG of the other ones?
Yeah, right. And that's kind of the thing, is like we want to prevent that, absolutely. So is there a way to prevent that with getting all of that, all of those features, I guess?
In Holochain, they have some kind of hashing that they can share.
Oh,
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The distributed hash table.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a friend told me something, but I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I've watched that video one time, and that was maybe 5 or 6 months ago. So I mean, I have almost no knowledge about how Holochain works. What I do remember is they were saying that it was basically a generalization of a blockchain, because you could instantiate any blockchain on Holochain, which I thought was really interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Every app, you know, every person has its own chain, and they're independent.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Okay, the hash of your program is the address on the DAG of your chain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And how this is, you know, how can I trust your chain? You can, like, I must analyze the whole your whole chain.
Well, with any node who's running the app or running, you know, that chain, verifies it. It runs it.
Oh, Jim, okay, let me see if I understand this correctly. Rather than, so like the Ethereum and our chain approach is that there's a blockchain and many validators. And what you're saying is now that there's like still many validators, but it's like one chain per validator. So like I have my own, Isaac has his own, you have your own, Thomas Lab has his own. No. Oh.
I'm validating all the chains of all the apps that I'm running on my validator.
One chain. Okay, so it's like one chain per
games on my validator, and so I would have the chains for all. I would be validating the chains for all the games that I serve.
Right, but then presumably there's other stuff that some people care about that you don't care about, and you're just like not validating those ones.
Right.
Okay, I see. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, interesting. I feel like we're at a part of computer science where there's like a lot of really cool and interesting like things being talked about, and I'm curious, Jim, if your whole career has felt that way, or if this is like actually a special time.
Well, you know, I mean, we've been at the cusp of the new world, you know, since the dawn of the internet, or really before the internet, and it just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
A lot has happened. I mean, it's been exciting, an exciting ride all the way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, I'm the eternal optimist, but you know, I was the one who told people back in the beginning that the internet was going to become commercial.
Yeah.
It's like TV, and you know, people thought it was the devil. You know, that never happened.
I think you got that one right, Nostradamus. That's good. That was a good prediction.
But I love, you know, I think our chain is our long-term goal. I think Holochain is probably something we can make use of much sooner, which is why I'm really excited about Rolang and Rust, or
That's cool. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to be doing a lot of Rust programming soon.
So Roxy in Rust, right?
Yeah, now that I've tried Haskell and tried JavaScript here.
Yeah, well, Rust is very safe, very secure. It's I think it'll be very robust in Rust and
Yeah.
efficient.
Jay's good at Rust too. That would be a cool way to start. I've never actually coded with him. That would be fun.
Yeah, I would love if we did a work study on it
Yeah.
regularly.
But when will we start to write the rolling and rolling?
Once we have a formal model of it, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that we need some kind of basic operations that we can use from the underlying language, because now if you want to write some complicated stuff, you need a bunch of libraries from Scala.
Yeah.
So how can we just get to this stuff, and then we can start to do rewriting part of the rolling and rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the past several months has been like me learning about programming languages and how to write them and stuff. And I feel like I'm very much in the nitty gritty of it. And I feel like a self-hosting language is a level up that I'm not quite ready for yet, but I very much look forward to.
I'm not sure for Rust, but Haskell is like bootstrapped from Haskell.
What was that?
Oh, Haskell's written in Haskell?
Yeah.
Oh. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Okay, so from a perspective of someone who doesn't understand what it means to write a programming language in that same programming language, where do you start? That seems too magical.
Yeah, but you start from like from some other language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when you have compiler, you just start to rewrite it.
Okay. So you write the compiler or the rolling interpreter or whatever in rolling, right?
Yeah.
First, you have to write it in JavaScript or Haskell or Scala or
something.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what is the minimal stuff that you need to start Bootstrap.
Yeah. Well, with Unix, they started with A, and then they had B for a short time. And B evolved into C. Oh,
A, B languages, A, B, and C.
I did not know that.
Oh.
That makes sense.
So what's D then? Because we got F# as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I'm kidding. I know those are two like totally different lineages.
Well, they're sort of related. I mean, S and R came out of the.
Oh, I've heard of R.
The paradigm sort of.
I think there is a D, but I'm not sure.
Is there really?
I think it is.
Is there an F flat?
I mean, Unix has so many branches. I mean, you can be sure there's every letter of the alphabet.
Yeah.
There's definitely a list of obscure programming languages that includes one for each letter.
And I know a lot of them. No.
Yeah.
It's definitely a D programming language.
dlang.org.
dlang.org. I think we should just start in Fortran.
They have a conference in London this year.
D-Lang does?
Yeah.
Oh,
Thomas Lab. Oh, you just learned that. I was like, wait, do you
know?
Yeah, he's like the representative of D-Lang.
Yeah. I started with assembly, Fortran, and RPG, and COBOL.
You did RPG, Jim?
Oh yeah.
I took a course on RPG at a community college once.
Wow.
It was useful for me to appreciate you know, what had happened in computer science before I got involved.
What is this sample code?
Yeah, I'm sending you guys a link for another esoteric.
RPG was specifically designed for people who use the unit record equipment. This is where we would program our on a wire board. You know,
Wow.
column 1 into the card into column 2 of the adder and all this. So when they made RPG, you know, the matrix of holes in the car, punches in the car, sort of correspond to a wire board. So that
Wow.
people that knew how to do the wire boarding could get onboarded into RPG very easily. Otherwise, it's not very useful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and the wire board you're referring to exactly what?
It's just a pegboard where you wire. You can wire column 1 of the card reader into column 1 of the adder.
Oh, I see.
And
Sounds like going back to the Enigma.
column 1
Almost.
of the total to column 1 of the punch or the printer.
Did it look like operating a telephone switchboard?
You would pull out one wire board and put it in the closet and get another wire board in order to run a different program.
Holy crap.
Oh. You're changing the function.
I started with those boards back in '64.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm picturing the what it looks like to be a computer programmer over the course of the last 50 years, and it starts out looking a little bit more like working in a factory, apparently, and then it slowly evolves down to guys that are hunched over their keyboards.
No, I was at NJIT while the graduate department of computer science was being formed, and it was, just a really exciting time. And in many ways, things in computer science are very much the same as they were then. So many of the greats were, really between the 50s and the 80s. But
I was listening that in that time, we didn't know what is the programming. So, everyone was having an idea what should programming be, what is programming, and how we can write programs. And so now we don't have this like a diverse thinking about programming, because we think that we know what is the programming, but this can be false.
right.
Like we figured out a way that works pretty good and everybody does it that way now, and there isn't so much thinking about what other ways could it look like.
Yeah. I think that I was listening to Simon Peyton-Jones about exactly about like the whole history of programming languages, and it totally makes sense, because we are now very single-minded in how we should write programs. In that time, that was like everyone had their idea, and there was much more invention.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, things like the Petri nets and communicating sequential processes, and a lot of things that are forgotten.
And that came in 70s or 80s.
But I think about the Multics effort, from which Unix is directly related. Multics was to be a totally parallel architecture was sort of like arching.
Interesting.
Rain Man.
I didn't hear about Multics before. I was reading Raymond articles on Medium, so they're
Me
pretty
too.
good.
Jim posted that link, and that's where I heard of Multics. And I was asking Rain Man about it since then. He has really interesting ideas about operating systems.
Yeah. And my question for him is, you can see operating system as a monad, but this monad is just pretending that it's a monad. It's because you don't have a join. You cannot say, I will put something in my Docker container. I will start a new host, Docker host in my Docker container. And I will just join it and extract it or put it back in the host. But you don't have this ability. So in that sense, it's just pretending that this is a monad, but not the real monad. So
Yeah, cool. Looks like Laura just got home. Should we wrap up, you think? Yeah. I think Isaac and I are gonna have to bounce out, guys.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's just past 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Good.
So
Gary, I can't believe you were sitting there that whole time.
No, I was listening intently, but
Gary's the guy that pops his head up from behind the couch.
Yeah.
enjoyed it though. Very stimulating.
Cool. Yeah. Good. All right. Good hanging again, guys. As always.
Yeah, great. See you.
Yep. See you next time.
Bye-bye.